Aloha everybody and welcome back to another episode of So Well Garage. I'm Cameron Sau, and in this video series, Let's Build a Turbo Taco, we are 2JZ swapping my 1999 Toyota Tacoma. So my Tacoma, being a 1999, has some damage here and there, right? It's a 21-year-old truck. There's some pretty bad dents in the front bumper, and in today's video I'm going to show you exactly how to fix that and how to paint it. Also, I have been super anxious to try and learn how to vinyl wrap, so stay tuned and watch me epically fail this. Alright, so first thing you want to do is go ahead and find and mark the damaged areas. Clearly here you can see that we have a pretty large dent in the driver's side bumper. We also have a couple of small, probably just rock bumps here in the front. And also here on the passenger side, you can see that we also have another significantly large dent. So now that we have identified the areas that we're going to be working on, we're going to want to go ahead and mask up all the surrounding areas. So that way when we do our sanding, we're not going to hit, mark, or mar the plastic. So we're going to go ahead and start sanding this bumper. I like to use 160 wet sandpaper. For me, I like to wet sand just because I think that I would rather put in a little bit more time and work and make sure I'm not taking away too much material, as opposed to just going at it with a much more abrasive sandpaper. So we're just going to go ahead and sand around the damage area and a little bit on the outside of that. Basically, we just want to make sure that our Bondo is going to stick properly to this. So prior to actually applying our Bondo, we want to ensure that we have a clean surface so that the Bondo can actually adhere properly. Now it's time to mix our Bondo. I was always told that for every golf ball size filler that you have, you want to add at least 1 pea size of hardener. I know that's some really weird measurements, but it's always worked out really well for me. Now we want to actually mix our filler and hardener. We're going to want to make sure that this is a consistent pink color. Our Bondo is now mixed, and now it's time to spread. So you want to spread this extremely flat and even across the entirety of the damaged area. Don't be afraid to use a little more than what you think is necessary, since we're going to be sanding this away anyways. Once again, we are using the 180 grit sandpaper. Essentially, you just want to level out any high spots. Applying your second coat is exactly the same as the first. All we are trying to do is cover up any low spots that we may have missed. Repeat the sanding process. Now apply a glazing putty. You're going to do this the exact same way that you were doing the Bondo. With a 600 grit wet sandpaper, we're going to sand around all the edges. Make sure to go ahead and feel around the areas. This is going to be super important because you're going to be able to feel anything that is either too high or too low. If you can feel ridges, that's bad. It's going to show up in the paint. So make sure to do this throughout the entire sanding process. Now that our Bondo is where we want it, we're going to go ahead and start prepping for paint. Now it's super important to mask off all the areas that we don't want to spray paint on. So here you can see that I've just have this leftover like mattress bag. We just moved to Hawaii, so I had a whole bunch of spare plastic laying around. So I went ahead and draped it over the front end of the truck, and then you can see that I'm masking around the bumper. Yeah. Now that we have everything masked up, we want to go ahead and do one final field check, see if everything feels right, and go ahead and start cleaning. I like to use isopropyl alcohol. It evaporates pretty quickly. Prior to actually spray painting anything, we want to make sure that the can of spray paint is well shaken. Before we actually put any paint on the bumper, you always want to do a test spray. For our first coat, we're going to do more of a misting. We are not looking for 100% coverage on this. It's okay to see chrome through the actual paint. Essentially what this is going to do is give a nice grittiness to the bumper that's going to allow the paint to stick really well to it. this is exactly what you want your first coat of paint to actually look like. You're going to want to allow each coat of paint to dry for about 10 or 15 minutes before you spray the next one. So in total, I only did about 3 coats, but with each coat of paint you want more and more coverage. You want to lay them on thicker and thicker, and then eventually you'll be able to see the nice gloss black finish that we're looking for. And look at that, guys. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think this looks pretty good. And just like that, we're done with the paint, and our bumper looks almost new. So it is extremely important to make sure that our paint dries, but we don't want it to dry fully before we take off our masking tape, because this can cause damage to the paint if we wait until the paint is fully dry. Alright guys, so now it is time for my absolute favorite part of this video. Vinyl wrap, right? I knew absolutely nothing going into this. I don't know how to vinyl wrap at all. I watched a couple videos on YouTube and I thought, oh yeah, I can do that. Not true. But with that being said, I learned a whole lot and I now feel a lot more comfortable trying to vinyl wrap the truck. So this is the color that I ended up deciding to go with for the vinyl wrap, and honestly this is made by Vivid. I really like it. The color is just absolutely amazing. If anybody knows me or my history, I had a truck that was almost exactly this color. It was my baby. I loved it. So, you know, shout out to Big Blue. Vinyl wrapping is not something that you're just going to be good at. You have to try it in order to learn and just see how the filament reacts to what you're doing, how you're stretching it, how you're pulling it, how you're heating it, right? So going into this, I did not have all the tools that I probably should have for this, right? I had a knife, I had the vinyl, and I had a heat gun, and that was it, all right? So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the vinyl wrap portion of this video. So the first thing that we want to do is measure out and see exactly how much vinyl we're going to need. And we're going to cut that out so that we don't have a whole lot of excess. Now we have to make sure that the area that we're going to be vinyl wrapping is going to be clean. I like to use isopropyl alcohol. Once again, it cleans really well and it evaporates quickly. Well, if you don't use too much. So what I've gathered from some of the videos that I've watched is that what we're going to do is we're going to try and spread the film around the area that we're wrapping and essentially get one spot that is glassed or essentially flat on the panel that we're wrapping. So one of the many things that I learned while trying to do this is that when you are pulling way too tight on these edges that we're going to be cutting, it's just going to deform the filament and essentially leave you with fingering, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So here you can see this is one of the times that I was just pulling this filament way too much and way too tight on these edges. So one tool that is super important when you're doing this is you want to make sure you have a nice, and I say nice and sharp knife. This knife is not. So I know I really shouldn't be cutting on the mirror, and like I said before, I did not have the proper tools for this. Knifeless tape would have made this job a million times easier and would have looked significantly better. So once again, I am stretching this filament way too much, and I'm putting way too much tension on these edges here. And basically what's going to happen is that tension is going to release, and it's going to leave fingers on the vinyl when I'm done. So here you can see exactly what I mean by fingers in the vinyl. It's essentially just the tension releasing. So honestly, I did not think that this was that bad for a first time, but after a couple days in the sun, you can see how even more of the tension releases, and you're just left with wrap that looks like crap. Alright guys, so you can clearly see that I totally botched that. Nothing about that looked good, right? But I couldn't leave it at that. I had to go for a redemption shot, right? So one of the things that I learned was that having so much tension on those edges is just going to end up with fingering, right? So what I decided to do was I was going to vinyl wrap the spots that had the most tension first, so that way there wouldn't be tension where I was going to be cutting. So that ended up with much better results than what I had the first time. I still have a lot to learn, but I'll show you guys a couple of pictures. I didn't videotape it because it looks literally just like the same process as before. So I figured I wasn't going to bore you guys with a whole bunch of time lapses on that kind of stuff. All right, so here we go. Alright, so that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, tell me what I'm doing right, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Once again, thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you in another video.